Hello there, my name is Brent, and this is the abandoned mining town of Cerro Gordo. And in this video, I am on the hunt for possibly the rarest artifact when it comes to this legendary mining town. A piece that should unlock all sorts of new history for this town after we can get it to a lab. I am also on the hunt for a one-legged miner and his three-legged dog to learn more about the restoration efforts of another abandoned mining town. I am also going to be bringing windows up our 8-mile twisty road to continue the reconstruction of the American Hotel here in town. And finally, I am dipping my toe into a new hobby, something that will bring all sorts of cool new things to this old town, and that is a sawmill. This video is another month living in my abandoned ghost town. If we could go back to 1865, we would be able to see this patch of land behind me go from just another bit of mountain range into the largest silver mine in California. We would see thousands of people flocking up the road, from merchants to miners to restaurant owners, butchers, and everything in between. And they would pull hundreds of millions of dollars worth of ore out of this hill right here. Then, just a couple short decades later, the ore would be lost, the people would leave, and the town would be abandoned, waiting for its next life. And over 100 years later, I came here in March of 2020 to try to do just that, to try to bring this old town back to life, which has proven very challenging. And I would say at the top of the challenging list has been the rebuilding of the American Hotel. It was a devastating blow early on that has pretty much defined my experience ever since. All right, and a big update this month. You can see the first of it, but inside there is the windows. And I know you guys have been asking what's going on with the hotel. This is what's going on in the hotel. And we have Kyle back. Kyle, what are we doing these days?
We are back up on the mountain. We're going to install some windows, finally, after, 6-7 months of waiting. Yeah, we're ready to go in with them.
All right. Well, good to see you back. I'll show the people watching at home. So inside here, I'll give you a little sneak peek of what we got. If we go in, you got some windows in here, windows over there. But before they were up here, they were 8 miles below us down in Keeler and had to come all the way up to be comfortably right here. All right, today is a day we've been looking forward to for a very long time. Inside this truck is the windows for the American Hotel. This has been the big holdup for months now, why we couldn't put on the insulation, why we couldn't put on the siding. And so inside here is the key to continuing progress up there. So we're going to get them out of there, loaded onto the 5-ton truck, because again, the only way to get them up there is the 8-mile dirt road. At long last, these are our windows, and these will be going in the American Hotel. Finally. So now it's just unloading these, getting up the 8-mile dirt road and not breaking any of them, so we don't have to wait another 6 months or whatever. Let's unload them. The road to Cerro Gordo has never been easy, and there's a lot of reasons for that. It's isolated, it's built in a wash, it's completely at the mercy of the elements. But to me, It's a testament of the grit and determination of the people who built this town. Those men who, standing in Keeler, a mile below in elevation, looked up at these mountains and said, yeah, we can build a road there. And that's exactly what Mortimer Belshaw did in 1878. He didn't see Cerro Gordo just as a sleeping mining camp. He saw potential, and he was determined to reach it. So his men blasted through rock, carved switchbacks into the cliffs, and slowly pushed an 8-mile road up the mountain. And by doing so, transformed this patch of dirt into one of California's most legendary mining operations. And today, the road is still a daunting, unpredictable beast, especially when you're hauling something fragile. It's rutted, washboard, twisting. It climbs relentlessly, winding through the canyon. But then, just as you're thinking of turning around, the town reveals itself. And it makes the arrival feel almost like an accomplishment. It's a feeling I remember from my first trip up here, and one that I'm reminded of every time we haul another load of building materials up this mountain. So far, they're looking pretty good. Nothing's easy getting up here, but these look like they should. So now, these, we're going to go up there, hopefully soon. So we have just begun, but I can show you that the American Hotel now has windows going in. This has been a very long time coming, so I am very excited to look out there. That is a view of town from the American Hotel, which is almost hard to believe. And you can see the windows up here, and after these go in, we have the exterior insulation over here. So this stuff is going to go on the outside of the hotel up against the weather-resistant barrier to make sure that this place stays nice and warm during the winters. It's basically creating an insulated cooler is what we're doing. And so if you go out here and you're wondering, oh, the building looks a little weird right now, fear not. What you're seeing is the weather-resistant barrier. And on top of this is going to go the exterior insulation. Then we have to put some fireproofing because we're in a wildfire area. Then there will be wooden cladding that is new wooden cladding, but it is treated to look old. So this building that stands out so much right now is soon going to look like the rest of town, which I am very, very excited about. And so as these windows are going in, I am just stoked because typically this time of year we have, knee-deep snow everywhere through town, so no progress is possible. So the fact that all of these windows are up here and some of them are going in is amazing. Today we are on an amazing adventure to meet the one-legged miner and his three-legged dog. That is Ross out at Tecopa Mines, a huge mine complex from the 1800s that just has a ton to explore. So I'm very excited to check it out. That's where we're headed. All right, we are almost to Tecopa, and I'm going to let Ross give the full history of this area. But Tecopa was established pretty much when Cerro Gordo was established. I think 1860s. By the 1870s, I know that Tecopa had a stamp mill. Eventually, they had a post office. They had all of these things surrounding the mine. And like Cerro Gordo, eventually this went bust. People moved away. But what Tecopa had that Cerro Gordo does not is Tecopa has hot springs, and so a town continued around these hot springs. And these days the town of Tecopa has about 150 residents in it, and just beyond Tecopa is the Tecopa Mines that Ross owns, where we are going. But we're just about to go through Tecopa. I'll point out the hot springs, show you a little bit of downtown, then finally we will see the mines, meet Ross, the one-legged miner, and his three-legged dog, and hopefully get underground. All right, The Tacopa Post Office. Tacopa Hot Springs Road. It's about 2 miles that way. You get to some hot springs. We're getting a little later in the day, so we're gonna make it right out to the mines. I like these palm trees. Someone had some vision back in the day. It seems we are approaching the Tacopa mines. Here we are. I recognize these types of roads. They're pretty familiar.
My name is Ross Dykeman, otherwise known as the one-legged miner out here at Tacopa Mines. And I've been out here for just over 3 years now, having purchased the place as a retirement property. And didn't really mean to come out here and buy a mine complex and set up as a museum. Mainly it was going to be my place to get away from the world, and after 30 years of work in public safety, EMS, and law enforcement in the big cities, as I was looking for property, I kind of stumbled across this place by a fluke. Once I realized how historic it was and how impressive it was, I had to have it, and then I couldn't really keep people out of it because it's just so special and spectacular. And a lot of people liked this place before I got here, so I set myself up with my first ever social media account, it's Tacopa Mines, and reached out to people to say, look, yeah, I bought the place. I know the rumors are already out there that somebody's got it, that's closing it off or sealing it up. That's not the case. I want to preserve the place, and if you really like it and want to come out and help, yeah, come on out and join me. Now we're going to head up to the Noonday Mine right now, which is one of the ones I take most people on the tours of. Noonday operated from 1877 really till about 1928, so it's the most historic mine on the property. And it's got a lot of the old timbering, miners' graffiti, and small spaces you see in the old mines, so it's kind of neat for that. Looking over that way, you can see the remains of the old rail bed. Once upon a time, this mine had its own railroad out here. Between 1960 and 1920, this was the largest lead producer in the state of California, this particular mine, so last out here. Yep. Yeah, and he wants to come on these mine tours. This is the one we usually take folks through. So it's a step back into the historic Noonday Mine, 1875 through 1928. And we love having tourists up here. So come on up, give me a call.
Oh, that's what you'll be seeing.
I like the patch spots and the cribbing little dynamite boxes.
Nice. Yep.
This mule one of the miners drew. I feel that mule's 130 years old. That's carbide lamp.
Wow.
That's why I like this mine. It's got most of the history in it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can't get an ore car through. Just kind of chop
Chop it
till
into
it fits. Room off to the side here, old dynamite storage or dry, and you got some miners' lunch pails hanging up over there. We just acquired.
Oh yeah.
Let's get back in here where it opens up a little better.
Sure.
As we collect period artifacts, we bring them back in here for display and storage. So, like some of the mine drills we got here. This is actually one of the original old Widowmaker stopers. Mm-hmm. Does not have an air or does not have a water hookup. So this is one of the ones you read about that caused so much dust the miners get silicosis breathing it in.
Yep.
They eventually started running water through the later rounds, like these guys here. But that's one of the old originals. So. There we go. Step back into that section there by the rock.
Yep.
Probably another trap. And turn around and look above me.
President Harding. That's cool. Yeah.
Got a little political commentary from the 20s there.
Yep.
Also another KKK logo over here.
Wow.
Bill Winter's one of our miners who tagged the mine a lot, usually in the lower levels.
Yep.
His tags are all early 20s. He usually dates them. And Ford for president over here from when Henry Ford was considering a run in 1924.
Oh, that's cool.
And you'll see some IWW markings through the mine here, Industrial Workers of the World, the Wobblies. Did you have them at Cerro Gordo?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Your mining manager will probably a lot happier about that. It's America's first large-scale union of unskilled workers. They were pretty heavy in the metal mines and a lot of the other industrial factories back east. Formed by socialists, Big Bill Hayward, Mother Jones, and a couple like that. Very militant, very activist, believe the workers should seize the means of production, rise up. And in fact, that's what they got them crushed was during World War I, when the U.S. entered the war, the IWW opposed the U.S. entry into the war, and they started doing strikes and slowdowns in the mines, and the government said, okay, who had it with that? They crushed them, deported a bunch, put a bunch in prison. But Big Bill Hayward actually fled to Russia, where he spent the rest of his life. But they were the first attempt at real union organizing, and it was a wake-up call. The mine owners had to start listening to the workers and recognize some sort of unionization.
Wow. That is cool. All right, a couple awesome days exploring the mines up here at Tecopa. There's so much to see up here, you could spend a month. And now we're actually going into Tecopa proper. We're gonna hit the date farm, we're gonna get some food, we're talking a little bit more to Ross. We're gonna wrap this trip up. Wow, look at this place. This is the date farm. And talk about like a Shangri-La. You're going through these crazy dirt formations and suddenly palm trees and date trees, and it just seems like you hit an oasis. That is cool. It reminds me a little bit of Saline Valley Warm Springs. Let's get in here and see what these dates I'm hearing so much about.
So after a fun day of underground work and surface exploration, we're now at the famous China Date Ranch here in Tecopa. This is a natural oasis and has been the center of social activity since the mines and the ranches were running here. It's currently run by Brian Brown and his family and some nice folks in the shop, except for Sarah. Anyway, you come to Tecopa, you got to come to the Date Ranch here. It's been one of the biggest attractions out here. It used to be a small garden that a Chinaman named Fu set up back in the day to raise vegetables and fruits for the miners and the ranchers. It kind of morphed into a ranch down here, and probably made more money than a lot of the mines did because everybody needed stuff here. And eventually it's morphed into a date farm here. They brought a lot of these date trees in from Iraq, and they grow dates, and they have dates in packages, date cookies, date bread, date cookies, date shakes, and smoothies, and all kinds of wonderful things. If it's made from a date, you can probably get it here. And the ride down, as you saw, is definitely worth the trip. So we love this place. It's definitely a Tecopa institution and world famous. And you can order this stuff online, China Date Ranch. And I'm not getting a bit of a nickelback for that endorsement. Renegotiate my contract with Brian. All right.
So over the past few months, I have been collecting a lot of the downed pinyon pines from around Cerro Gordo in hopes of feeding a new hobby, and that is woodworking. Ideally, sawmilling, creating our own lumber to hopefully create our own furnishings for the American Hotel. I first got a sample taste of this when I was up in Washington milling some wood with my friend Jason, and so far I've collected some downed trees, I've brought them to our hoist house, and I've tried to use an Alaskan mill or a chainsaw mill, and it has just been not the most fun with this pinyon wood. But today I am headed to pick up a portable sawmill from Norwood. I am very excited about this. It's been in the talks for a while. They are at a trade show about 3 hours from Cerro Gordo, so I'm on my way there now. We're gonna pick up the sawmill, bring it back to Cerro Gordo, and start creating some lumber that'll hopefully be used for the furnishings of the American Hotel. So a rainy day, good day for a road trip. We'll go check out this sawmill and show you it in action.
I'm Brian Shelswell. I'm the Chief Sawyer for Norwood Sawmills. We're here at the World Ag Expo in Tulare, California. We've got our HD 36 on display here. It'll do a 36-inch diameter log. Comes with enough track standard to cut a 13-footer. We've got an extra 4-foot extension on this, so you can do 17-foot. It's been a great show for us, and we're here now to show Brent how to run his mill.
All right, so I just got my training. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate that.
No problem, Brent. We really appreciate you coming out. It was fun to work on the mill with you and teach you how to use it. You're gonna have a lot of hours of enjoyment out of it. Any questions at all, whether it be on the mill itself or how to mill up the logs, please don't hesitate to ever call us. We've got lots of people that are really helpful and can get you going. But enjoy your mill, and it was a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And just like that, we're all hooked up. And the next stop for this mill is Cerro Gordo, California, and some pinyon pines. I'm excited. Here it is, the beginning of a new hobby. Let's go. I'm gonna run out of logs soon. I've been just milling and milling and milling. And all these pieces you see, they're all true 2 inches. They're really narrow, but they're pretty thick. And it's funny, as you're milling them, there just becomes this like want to not waste anything. Even these little scraps I'm throwing over there, like this piece, it's too thin over there to do anything with. But this looks like it would be a beautiful like cutting board. And given this is my kind of first foray into this, I think I'm gonna try to make this into a cutting board and maybe give it away to one of you guys, as my first project. But I got a sander, chop it off here, put some oil on it, see what we can do with this thing. All right, I think arts and crafts is over for the day, but I have some beautiful, truly 2-inch thick planks over here. They're a little wonky. They go all over the place because they're pinion, but look at those things. Those didn't exist earlier. And I am in love with this new sawmill. It is a lot of fun, and I can see these boards becoming something very beautiful for the American Hotel. That's my hope. Maybe a check-in desk, maybe desks for every room. If you're out there and you can think of a better idea of what I should do with all of these boards, let me know. If you're out there and you could do something better with all of these boards, let me know. If you're out there and you have a favorite YouTube channel that's woodworking that could make something really awesome for the American Hotel with this wood, tag them below, send them my video, connect us, because I am excited and I want to make something really cool and lasting for the American Hotel. Today my arts and crafts was this little cutting board that I stamped with Cerro Gordo, and I'm very proud of it. Now I'm looking around, every scrap looks like a cutting board to me. But that's probably what most people that get into woodworking feel like when they look around at scraps. But like I do a lot of these things, I'm going to give this to one of you guys. There'll be a link below. It's free to enter. I love kind of giving away my first iterations of new hobbies, so you guys can have this cutting board in your own home. But again, let me know what I should do with this wood. I am very excited about this. It's gonna be a great winter project, and so be on the lookout. There's gonna be a lot more milling happening. Thank you to Norwood for sending this and sending me on this quest of a new hobby. I feel great, and I think there's gonna be some great things coming to Cerro Gordo. So when it comes to the history of Cerro Gordo, this town that I get to call home, the real story is in the history that's been lost. This town was established in 1865 as a booming mining town in a period when record keeping wasn't exactly the best. And I think compounding that issue is that the courthouse for Inyo County that would have held a lot of these important documents wasn't even constructed until 1869. That is when we finally had a place, a repository for whatever records could have happened up here at Cerro Gordo. And 3 years later, in 1872, that courthouse was knocked down and the documents within it were destroyed in an earthquake. So we lost all the way up to 1872. Then a new courthouse was built, everything was great. And in 1888, that courthouse burned down to a fire. So we're up to 1888 with no records. Then they rebuilt the courthouse. They thought it was gonna be great. Then they decided, you know what, we need a safer courthouse. So they built a fourth courthouse in 1919. So we're talking during Cerro Gordo's active years, there were 4 courthouses that would have held the documentation of actually what was happening up here at Cerro Gordo. This town was so infamous, was so popular in its day, that we're lucky that a lot of newspaper reports were written about it, but true historical information about this town is very, very difficult to come by. And I think over the past 5 years of living here, that is one thing that I have taken upon myself to try to compile the clearest picture of Cerro Gordo's past that ever existed. I feel very fortunate to live in a time when that's possible. These newspaper articles are now digitized where I can scan through them infinitely faster than anybody could in the past. We have the books that were written about this town when this town was truly a booming mining town. I've been fortunate enough to be able to speak to the direct descendants of people who actually lived up here and worked up here to compile that first-hand research. We've taken extraordinary steps like 3D mapping the mines to actually understand the things that were happening here and trying to compare those to the reported things that sometimes the books might have fudged one way or the other. And I think the biggest mystery, the thing that I always talk about and everybody talks about this town, is the actual production of the lead and silver here. There's reports that this town produced $500 million worth of minerals, that these bars were making hundreds of millions of ounces of silver and all of these different things. And when it gets down to it, there wasn't great reporting on the ore itself. That we know that they created these lead and silver bars actually right here in the smelter that I'm sitting at, but the composition of those bars, the true percentage silver versus lead, which extrapolates out to the entire production of this entire town, is very murky. And so today, in my most recent quest to fill in the missing pieces of this town's past, I am hoping to get my hands on an original, maybe a few original Cerro Gordo lead and silver bars. These things are extraordinarily rare. There is less than 10 known in existence. But I recently met somebody down in Lone Pine that has told me that they have some. And so I've done a little bit of research. It seems like it might check out. But today, my goal is to go down to Lone Pine. We're going to try to get our hands on one of these fewer than 10 in existence Cerro Gordo lead and silver bars, take it to a lab and truly find out what the mineral composition was here at Cerro Gordo and see what that story is that tells about the entire history here. I am very excited, so we're gonna get in my truck and head down to Lone Pine. These bars back in the day were called pigs. And these pigs were the first step in the refining the ore at Cerro Gordo down to pure silver. And so the ore at Cerro Gordo was galena. And galena is lead, silver, sulfur, some silica, some other impurities. And up in town, they would take the ore, they would crush it up, they would add in a flux, they would heat it up, they would get out the impurities, and they would pour what was left into these molds of pigs, and they would call the bullion that was left base, and this base would be pure lead and silver. And depending on the literature that you read, these bars would be between 80 pounds and 88 pounds, and they would contain anywhere from maybe a few percentage silver, 1 or 2% silver, all the way up to, I've read, 20-30% silver. And so one of the reasons I'm so excited about getting one of these bars is not just to put it in the museum so people that are visiting the town, you know, all of you guys watching, can see what built this town, what built Los Angeles. But my excitement is to fact check that, to take this bar to a lab, you know, have the lab test exactly what's in this bar. You know, the technology has advanced so much since the 1800s as far as assaying, where we should be able to get down to the exact percentage silver and lead that's in this bar, and that's able to allow us to add to history, you know, to truly say what was in these bars that built, you know, one of the most infamous silver mines in California's history. The other day, I was in line at the post office, and a guy came up to me and said, "Oh, you're Brent from Cerro Gordo, right?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, I have something you might be interested in." I was like, "Oh, what's that?" He goes, "I have some original bars from Cerro Gordo in the 1800s." I went over to his house, and there in his garage, just collecting a little bit of dust, were these bars. One of which was stamped Union, which is the biggest mine in Cerro Gordo's history, and the other was Cerro Gordo with a little VB on it. And the VB refers to Victor Beaudry, one of the original owners here who owned one of the original smelters, which checks out a lot. And so I took some photos, I consulted with some friends, some historians. They said, "Oh, that looks like the real deal." And so today I'm headed back to that garage to hopefully secure these bars for Cerro Gordo's museum, but also to then hopefully turn around, take them to a lab, and figure out exactly how much silver was really in these things so we can better understand Cerro Gordo's history. All right, we are almost there. I'm excited, a little nervous. Hopefully this all works out. I'll see how much the current owner wants to talk about them. Maybe not at all, maybe some, but momentarily, I hopefully will have a true piece of Cerro Gordo history. Oh, and there they are. Just like that. Wow. All right, baby. We got them. For privacy of where they came from, I won't say his name, but very nice gentleman. Bars look amazing. He actually threw in another bar that's stamped Selby, the refinery I was mentioning where these bars went to originally. I'll pull over and I'll show you. So there's the first. You see Cerro Gordo, WS, and then VB, and that's the Victor Beaudry stamp. And down there you see the other one, Union. That's from the Union mine, and then Selby as well. And I've only seen bars like this, like I said, anywhere, and that's at the Eastern California Museum. And so just in the excitement, it's early in the day, I am going to take a trip up to Independence, which is about, only 20, 30 minutes from here. And we're going to try to see those bars, compare them to what these bars are. But then I am going to call the place that does what's called an XRF. And an XRF is a laser essentially that looks at the material and tells you what the material composition of that is. And as we're doing that, I'm going to compare to the historic notes of what Cerro Gordo's bars were reported to have, and we're going to learn something new. But this is very exciting, and I can't wait to uncover some of this history that's hidden in this bar. All right, now we are in Independence, California, where the courthouses and all that are here in Inyo County, and we are going to one of my favorite little museums, which if you haven't been to, you definitely should go. It is the Eastern California Museum. There it is. All right, so just got out of the museum, and their bar inside is a Union bar, very similar looking to the bar that I just picked up. So similar looking, I am very confident, but potentially more interesting and more exciting is the museum had documentation of where the bar came from, where it was found, its weight, its length, its height. And this is very exciting for a few reasons. One, we can compare the bar I just got to the bar that has been vetted that is in the museum to see if it's from the same lot. And the story that the museum heard of where these bars came from is the same story that the guy that I got the bars off of said as well. Apparently, sometimes in the 1960s or 1970s, a metal detectorist was going along the road leading up to Cerro Gordo, and in the wash, he found 4 to 5 of these bars. And one bar is in the museum in Independence. One bar is now with me, soon to be in Cerro Gordo. One bar, the person in the museum also told me that the guy in Bishop has. So one bar is there, there's 3. And then one bar is at a winery somewhere in California. That's what I've been told. And it reminded me, I was once sent a photo of a bar at a winery. And so that may be the 4 total bars, potentially even in existence, or at least known about, accounted for. Now, the next step is for me to get these bars to a lab tomorrow. We're gonna waste no time. We're gonna get these to the lab, and we're gonna see what the assay of these bars compares to these, and also compares to the historical literature. I'm gonna review a little bit more literature tonight to get an idea of what we should be expecting. But this is big. This is exciting to know that, 21 of 4 or 5 bars in existence will now live at Cerro Gordo. So let's get these back comfortably there and then get ready for the big lab test. I have spent the past day pretty much without sleep pouring into old newspaper articles, production reports, books, online sources, just anything that I could to try to figure out what should be in these bars so we have something to compare it to. But all of these articles, I will summarize the best of the findings. And the first is an article that was written in August of 1870 by a guy named Mauricio, and he was kind of the Cerro Gordo correspondent for the Inyo Independent. And in the newspaper, he has an article titled "A Night at the Smelting Furnace." And as part of that, one part says making of bars. And it talks about using iron ladles to pick up this molten base bouillon and to pour it into bars. And in that, he says, I counted just 12 of those molds filled at one tapping and was told that was the average amount ladled at each time, and that the weighed 83 pounds, or about 1,000 pounds in total. And he goes on to say that this ore could be worth between $150 or $250, and that all depends on the assaying department. And he says that the assaying department is headed by one Mr. W.M. Belshaw, or Mortimer Belshaw, who was the owner of the town, whose house I still live in today, which I think is interesting that the reporting of the silver content would be left to the owner of the mine. It seems like a little bit of a conflict of interest in a way. I would assume that these bars were, later tested at the smelter they would be sent to, but it leaves some questions related to reporting generally. But at the very least, we figured out that these bars should weigh about 83 pounds each. If we look a little bit later, in 1877, there is a report that Belshaw's furnace was making 126 ounces of pure silver per 2,000 pounds. If you do that math, it's about 0.43% silver. And again, I don't know if they were talking about the 2,000 general pounds. Was that the raw galena, or was that the smelted down base that they were pouring into these bars themselves? And if we go a little bit later, into the 1960s, if we look at the official USGS report, the United States Geological Society, they put together the report in the 1960s, and they show that production between 1869 and 1876 produced 22,400 tons of lead and 3,150,000 troy ounces of silver. And if all of that was contained within the bars, and you do that math, that comes out to just about a 0.5% silver, so 0.48%. Tomorrow, we are going to find out for sure what these bars coming out of Cerro Gordo in the 1800s contained. And given the fact that there's so few of these in existence, this might be the best shot that we have of writing the history books. So I am very excited. I'm gonna get a little bit of sleep, and tomorrow we're headed to the lab to figure this all out. All right, today is the day that after 150 years, we are going to get a very accurate count of exactly how much lead and silver are in these Cerro Gordo bars. I am headed to the lab. The lab manager, Alex, is gonna meet me there. We're gonna use the XRF gun on all 3 of these ingots. And I am very, very excited to kind of contribute to the history books today. And so we're almost there. We're gonna get a little bit of a review from Alex about what the technology that we're gonna use. Then we're gonna get the results. Cool.
Hi, I'm Alex and this is Eric. We're at the lab materials testing and we're going to do an assay of these lead and possibly silver bars that Brent brought us from Cerro Gordo. What we're going to do the elemental analysis with is a XRF PMI gun. XRF stands for X-ray fluorescence. What this basically does is it has an X-ray tube in it, and it will shoot the X-ray at the material, excite the atoms in the material, and those atoms themselves will fluoresce and X-ray back to a detector in the gun. From that energy that it detects, it will determine what elements are in the material. Positive things about this: totally non-destructive. It's not going to do any damage to the ingots or the ore, and of course handheld, easy to walk around with and everything. The downsides of this is it only analyzes the surface. So we got to get a clean surface. We're going to clean up the back of these bars at 3 locations, both ends and the center. As long as these bars are uniform in their casting, the analysis should be the same. It should be uniform throughout. We got the bars cleaned up and now we're ready to analyze them. The first thing we're going to do is get the instrument warmed up. That only takes a few seconds, but we do have a pure lead bar here. And then we have some pure silver. So we're going to check the instrument against these, make sure it's reading correctly. And then we're ready for the analysis and the big reveal of how much silver and how much lead is inside.
Cool.
Lead check is passed. And we'll check the silver.
Wow.
Just like that, that easy.
That fast.
That's why these things are great. I'm gonna do a 30-second hold on these.
Okay.
Just gives it a little more time to analyze.
Yeah.
There we go. There we go. 20 seconds is what we'll give it then.
All right.
It did start to pick up a little copper there at the end.
But almost all lead.
Almost all lead.
No reading of silver.
No,
Wow.
not on that one, but
All
that's
right.
why we're shooting 3 different spots.
Yep.
See what happens on that one. Eric, that is shot 3-2-3. It's looking uniform compared to the first one. And the great thing about this instrument is it's so portable and compact, but its limitations make it so it can't read lighter elements, things like carbon and whatnot. Should have no problem with lead and silver.
Yeah.
But also it only reads the surface. So again, if this wasn't uniform and say the center of this did have a higher silver content, there's no way this is going to read it.
Right.
But as far as non-destructive analyzers, this is the way to go, because now you're not taking shavings off of it, you're not damaging the sample in any way.
Yeah.
So we will move on to the Union bar.
Yes.
Well, it sure looks like it came from the same mine.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah. Chemical composition is very similar. galena, which reads very close to every ingot, except the Selby was pure lead. The other ingots, the Cerro Gordo stamped and the Union stamped, about 98% lead, and around 0.3% antimony. Picking up more impurities, though, in the Union bar, and of course the galena, some iron in there is what we're detecting as well, but no traces, at least using this instrument and its capabilities, of any silver at all. So it must be so low that, yeah, you have to process a whole lot of this stuff to get the amounts. And it'll give you the full analysis. Anything that says LOD, it says pretty much lower than detectable limit.
Okay.
So you can just ignore those ones and go to the elements that actually have a percentage reading there.
What is the SB again?
Antimony.
Antimony, okay.
Yes.
So it's 1.2% antimony,
Yes, that's what I was picking up in there.
and then pretty much the rest lead.
Yeah, 98.623% lead.
All right, so I am back at Cerro Gordo with the bars. I was thinking on the drive back here how ironic in a way it was that I was bringing them back here. You know, all of the effort to extract this ore, all of the effort to refine this ore, all of the effort to bring these bars down this road on a wagon, and here I am going through all of this effort to bring them back up here to town. It's kind of a funny full circle, but it feels right. And these are where they'll be, at least for as long as I'm around. And I've gotten to be very proud of this little museum that we've put together here in the general store. You know, I've been adding a lot of things to this thing, and it's coming together really well. And we're open every day from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. There's no charge. Come up here, check it out. Come check out these new bars. Check out all of the other artifacts that we have in town. But back to the bars themselves. I did a little bit of thinking and a lot of research and a lot of things checked out, and there's a few questions that remain. First, the Selby bar. Selby was the refinery that the Cerro Gordo base bars, the bars that should be lead and a little bit of silver, went to be separated into pure lead and pure silver. After the fact, the pure silver would go to the mint and Selby would sell the pure lead. So the fact that that bar checked out as pure lead on the XRF is perfect. That's exactly what it should be, and that is what it is. When it comes time to the Cerro Gordo bars, those took a little bit more research and a little bit more thinking and have a few more questions remain. Now, the Eastern California Museum had a document of when they were getting these bars from the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles. The Cerro Gordo bar was described as 27 inches long, the mold length of 23.5 inches, with the remaining 2 inches for lip. I measured and weighed both the Cerro Gordo bar and the Union bar, and they came back as the same measurements and weights pretty much as the bars in the Eastern California Museum. Now, if you look at the analysis, back in the 1970s, the bars were analyzed for the Natural History Museum. Now, these bars that are now in the Eastern California Museum, and much like the bars that we did, they were pretty much above 96, 97% lead. They both had about 1.1 to 1.4% antimony. And that's interesting. Antimony was found at Cerro Gordo. There's reports in MineDat and other places showing that antimony were here. But back in the day, antimony was often added to lead to create an alloy that was stronger. It was more corrosion resistant. It was more rust resistant. And it was just something that occasionally would be added. Now, I have not found any reports that they added antimony into the bars here, but it's very possible. And the fact that both the one in the Eastern California Museum show about the 1.1 to 1.3% range, and so did ours, is a good sign. Now, the biggest difference between the report that they did in the 1970s and us is the presence of silver. what we were all wondering about. And back in the 1970s, both the Cerro Gordo bar and the Union bar showed about 1.2% silver. And when we distilled our bars with the XRF, we cannot detect any silver. Why is that? I have a few theories. One, the galena at Cerro Gordo was different, right? So they talk often in the history books about the high-grade ore and the low-grade ore, and the high-grade ore having more silver in it and the low-grade ore being mostly just lead. And this could have been a batch where they were just refining the low-grade ore, and it was not, uniform across all batches. So for this specific ingot, they ladled out the results, and it was from the low-grade ore, and it was basically pure lead. That is a very possibility. Another possibility comes down to the method of testing. XRF guns are just testing the surface of the material. They're not penetrating into it. And we could have had surface oxidation or corrosion. These bars were sitting in the lake for 100 years, or wherever they were found, along the road for 100 years, and they could have oxidized. And so even though we sanded them down, we could have gotten different results because the XRF gun could not penetrate to where the silver was found. This could have been in the cooling process too. There are different masses, both silver and lead. And so during the cooling process, the silver could have been trapped inside of the lead, and we could not get it because of the testing method that we were using. Another possibility is that back in the 1970s, if you see, this says semi-quantitative analysis, meaning there was a margin of error. It could be that the report back in the 1970s wasn't correct. That is a real possibility. And to get to the bottom of all of this, what I should do is take essentially a core sample of this bar. So drill into this bar, take it out, and get it fire assayed. And for me, that just kind of goes against the entire purpose of what I brought them up here for. I brought them up here because they are a historic thing. I do not want to cut them in half. I do not want to drill into them. And so for now, the question remains of why we got the results we got. I think that Cerro Gordo's history is a puzzle, and there's pieces all around, and I've relied on this channel over the last 5 years to help me put those pieces of the puzzle back together. So I'll present it to you guys. Why do you think that back in the 1970s there was that result and we are getting this result today? What does that mean to you? I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear about any type of other testing that we could do to try to get to the bottom of this. 150 years ago, a miner stood hundreds of feet underground in essentially the pitch black, chipping away at ore to bring it to the surface. That ore was brought right over here to a smelter and refined into this bar that I am now holding right now. That bar was loaded on a wagon, sent down the hill with some mules, and forgotten about. Just another artifact lost to time. And that's what happens. History is forgotten. Towns rise and bust. Cerro Gordo was once a thriving town with merchants, miners, restaurant owners, all sorts of people. And then the ore ran out, the people left, and it was sat forgotten. But just because things are forgotten, whether it's the town or the bar, doesn't mean that they're worthless. This bar has a huge amount of worth, not just in the mineral content that's within it, but in the stories that it contains, of the men who sacrificed their life to make it, about the town that relied upon these bars 150 years ago. And when I first came out to Cerro Gordo, there had been years where I think people saw Cerro Gordo as just another forgotten place. But I saw it a little bit different. I saw it as a place, with the weight of history upon it, just waiting for that history to be revealed, to be recovered, to be brought back to life. And that is kind of what keeps me going. 150 years ago, a miner made this bar, and then he probably forgot about it. That's as far as his work went. And I think that a lot of things that we do with our lives are temporary. They're things that we forget, that people will forget. But sometimes we create these things that are worth being remembered. We create these things that people will pick up in the future and bring forward once again. And I think that is what kind of keeps me going here at Cerro Gordo. That's why I love discovering things like this bar. That's why I love every day being up here. And that's what just drives me and brings a fullness to my life. And I think that these discoveries, these pieces of the past, this history, this real history is out there all around us. It's not, you don't have to go to an abandoned mining town to find it. You know, it's in your backyard. It's hidden in a book in your bookshelf. It's in the stories of the people around you. You know, it's in the abandoned building down your street. And so if I could say anything, I would say get out there and explore. You know, try to find those histories that are everywhere. Try to tell the story that they hold, because I find it very, very fascinating and very rewarding. And so with that, I'm going to sit here, watch the sun set over Death Valley, and just appreciate all the stories that are all around me. But I thank you guys, as always, for checking out this video. It means a lot to me. I hope you get out there, do a little bit of exploration. I hope to see you guys next time.